All right, and we are live. Welcome, everyone. Welcome on Zoom. Welcome on Facebook. Welcome on YouTube. Welcome wherever you're joining from. We are happy to have you with us. We are right here going to discuss the Persian Bayán. We have Peter Terry with us. This is our session dated May 11, 2022. We were happy to have you joining with us. Short introduction. Peter Terry is a person who's read through the Persian Bayán quite a few times. He's written a few words on this subject, which we've covered in the previous session. The thesis he wrote, we recommend that you discover this on clearwaterbahais.org. We're thankful that you're joining us and, more importantly, sharing this extremely important discovery with us, where we're going through a book that has been so little studied and so little understood. And as Peter has in so many pithy and yet powerful words described, it is an essential book to consider when considering the Baha'i faith as the mother book of the Bábí Dispensation. With that being said, we thank you all for joining us. We look forward to continuing our sessions. And Peter, please tell me, what are we looking at today?
So, first of all, did Jeremiah send out, first of all, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear
Yes,
you.
my volume is turned up high enough. Okay.
Yes, yes,
All right.
but we can't see you. So
You can't
if you
see
could uncover your face.
Well, that, yes, I'll do that. Although I'm not nearly as beautiful as my children, so, you know, that's of doubtful utility. Let's see now. Oh, yes. Okay, fine. There. Can you see me?
There we go. We can see you now.
All right, now. So, so were the people who were on the call yesterday, I mean, last week, did those people receive a notification of what pages we were going to be considering today?
They did receive a notification. I only sent it out, I think, Monday night. So what I'm going to try to start doing, or actually what's going to happen now, is at the end of this meeting around 10 p.m., there's going to be an email to everyone in my list that's going to have the next week's information.
Excellent. So what did we have? What pages did you have for the first assignment from the Persian Bayán?
I had pages, Vahid, I don't know the exact pages, but it's for Vahid 1 and 2.
Vahid 1 and 2. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that needs to be revised, because that's much too much material. That's
Stephen
150.
posted it, by the way.
What?
Stephen Collins posted it here in the comments. If you could take a look, the items that he understood and signed.
Okay, let's see. Okay. Yes. Okay. So to be clear about this, it says well, I think this is a little odd, because I thought we were week 2. No? I think we were week 2, because week 1 had the reading of my abstract and I'm sorry, analysis of the themes, and thematic analysis and summary of all of the contents. And I believe the assignment for week 2 was should have been part of this. But in any case, we'll straighten this out, folks. Jeremiah and I will. The fact of the matter is, we're not going to cover pages 39 through 132 today. That's not realistic I do not expect anybody is going to read 100 pages of the Persian Bayán in 1 week. If you did, you probably won't remember very much of it. It's probably not, you're gonna be, maybe you'll be on cloud 9, but you won't be able to communicate any sort of comprehension of the material that you've covered. So let's be realistic today. We will cover Vahid I. We will cover the Exordium, which is the introduction that the Báb wrote to the entire work, which is contained in both in the translation that you found online, and it's also contained in the analysis and summary. The Exordium is pages, I'm talking about the PDF, pages 24 through 38. Then Vahid I is pages 39 through 48. So we can definitely get through those materials today. Then we'll see how much we'll get into Vahid II. There need not be a rush on this because the material that the Báb covers in the very beginning of the book is extremely important for people to understand in order to open the doors on the rest of the document. And there are many things that are not obvious. There are many things that you will have questions about, that you will be curious or even befuddled. All right, and that's fine. That's fine. That's to be expected. So that being said, since I want to reiterate, this is a seminar. This is very similar to the kind of seminar you would have in graduate studies at university, where people read something and then they share their thoughts or they share their questions with each other. And the instructor or the leader may have more answers than other people, but not necessarily. Sometimes you get really good answers from other people. So that being said, let's look at the Exordium, and I invite your comments. And if you don't immediately have any, then I'm going to talk about 8 things that I wanted to point out about this particular part of the Persian Bayán. Okay, so are there any questions about this particular part or any comments about this particular part that somebody would like to ask at this time? And either Jeremiah or John is going to be recognizing you individually to speak about these, or you can send a text to them and they'll read it. I see Dawn has something she wants to ask or say.
So there are 2 Dons, because it appears that someone, when I sent a link, it was my link that worked. So the other Don, I believe your name is Lucinda. Do you know how to change it? Those 3 dots up in the corner.
It will only let me change my profile picture, not my name.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
That's really funny.
I'll
Okay,
correct that in a second and you'll be able to change your name. Give me a
This
second.
is extraordinary. Well, my name is Mullah Hussein. So we'll see. We'll see if I have a clue about what the Persian Bayán. So somebody here had a question. I see Lena Zain.
Yes, yes, thank you. I do not have an exordium. I have something called the preludium.
That's fine. I think it was called exordium in one part and preludium in the other.
Thank you. That's it.
It's the same thing.
Thank you.
Yes, sure. So Rather than wait any longer, I'm going to dive in. So one thing I want to point out in the very beginning is that for approximately, as you know, 1,260 some years, one Bismillah existed. In other words, everything that was Islamic was introduced by one statement that was found in the Quran. You may catch me on that. Maybe there was something that didn't fit that pattern, but it was the pattern for the Islamic dispensation. The Báb opens the Exordium or Preludium of the Persian Bayán with a new one, a new Bismillah, which has the same numerical value as the previous one. So he's making a point here. This is a new dispensation. There are new revelations of God's truth that are coming in the Persian Bayán, and it is still representative of the unity of God and the unity of the manifestations and the unity of the ongoing revelation of God. The numerical value of both the Islamic Bismillah and of the Bábí Bismillah is 19, which, as you know, is the number of unity. So that's the first thing I wanted to point out. You're going to encounter this numerous times in the work. And it's very important because for the Báb, beginnings are extremely important. We have to pay attention to what starts. What is the starting point? Second point I wanted to point out, the major theme of the Exordium is the sublimity of God, the transcendence of God. The Báb goes over and uses the most magnificent language to express this theme. Third theme is the primal will. You see, he's going to lay out the architecture from the very beginning. The primal will, he talks about it, and he separates the primal will from him whom God shall make manifest. We'll come back to that about why that's important. And it says that the primal will is the first believer in him whom God shall make manifest. So the next theme is the Báb says that God has created all things by his order. The word that Nicolas translated as ordre, and which this anonymous translation has rendered as order, is amr. And amr is the term used throughout the Bábí and Baha'i writings for the cause of God, for the world of cause, as distinct from the world of God and the world of creation. This intermediate world is one of the distinguished and distinctive teachings of the Bábí and Baha'i revelations. And we will see it brought up with a variety of different terms over and over again. Another thing that he mentions in this first section of Persian Bayán is the day of the manifestation of God. The day of the manifestation of God, as the Báb reiterates over and over, is the day of the appearance of any manifestation of God. So the day of Moses, the day of Krishna, the day of Jesus, the day of Muhammad, the day of the Báb, the day of Baha'u'llah, these are all the days of God. This is also confirmed and explained in one of the passages in Gleanings. So another theme of this portion of the text, this beginning, is that the fruit of belief, in other words, the defining characteristic of one's loyalty to God and his manifestation is one's recognition of the next manifestation. This is a theme that the Báb returns to also again and again. Of course, he was preparing his own followers to recognize him whom God shall make manifest, but he's also making the point that the Muslims who did not recognize him have actually missed out on the fruit of their own revelation, of their own faith. And that similarly, the Christians who did not recognize Muhammad or the Jews who did not recognize Jesus were in the same boat. And finally, the eighth point that I wanted to point out is that the Báb says that we have a very different nature from God. We are not in a position to question what God decides, what God says, what God wills. He is in a position to judge what we say and what we do. Now, I just want to point out that the Báb wouldn't have to say that if it wasn't the belief of many people that they could go around judging the manifestation of God and saying, oh, I've got better ideas than him, or I don't have to follow him because I have a special relationship with God, which makes me independent of his guidance. This, again, is a very important theme for the Báb, because he is going to demonstrate through this book that there is actually one revelation from God, one religion from God, and that it is punctuated by new manifestations. But if we miss out on the successive manifestations, we're missing out on the whole theme, because the whole point of Revelation is that it is progressive. So those are the points that I wanted to share with you from my reading and understanding of this portion of Persian Bayán. And now I would like to invite anybody who has questions or any comments to go ahead before we move on to the first Vahid. I see that Kirk has his hand up, but I'm not in a position to unmute people.
There.
I think, Kirk, you can go ahead.
So I'm just trying to catch up with what you were just saying, Peter, about Amra or order. Is that, did I get the word right? Is that the,
Yes.
the Farsi word Amra, or?
It's Arabic, but it's okay.
It's Arabic, sorry.
Use it in Farsi.
I'm sorry, what is it in Farsi?
No, it's they use the Persian language in the 19th century used a huge vocabulary of Arabic words.
Okay, so
Arabic origin. Yeah.
Okay.
So this is one of them.
so this is you're referring to where the Báb often says, I haven't read it here in the Bayan yet, but where he says from heaven and earth and everything in between, is the in between the order, the Amra is that what that is that you're talking about?
I think we're going to have to look at that when it occurs, because it doesn't necessarily mean that. It could be speaking of something else. For example, between what is sometimes called the heaven and the earth is something called Malakut. And Malakut is where the angels live. And Malakut is where the souls of human beings, after they pass on, that's where they live. And Malakut is not A.L.M, which means the world of cause, because the world of cause is inhabited by manifestations, not by us. We never live there. That's part of the world of creation that is on the other side of the tree beyond which there is no passing, if you're familiar with that expression in the Quran.
Yeah, right.
But Malakut
Okay.
is very much part of our reality. In fact, it's more part of our reality than this realm, which is sometimes called A.L.M. This is a physical realm. We're only here for a short time, and then we're going to be in for eternity in all of these worlds that are called, the umbrella term for those worlds is Malakut, or the kingdom.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Yes, Lena.
How do you differentiate the definition you have just given with the use of the word amr in Arabic in the Middle East? All Baha'is that speak Arabic tend to use the word amr with as a distinction, not as a distinction, but to refer to the faith.
Yes, because they talk about the cause of God.
Yes.
Amrullah. Yes.
Amrullah. Yes. Amrullah.
Valiyatul Amrullah. Yes, of course. Yes, well, of course, the term has different meanings, but this is the term that Abdul Baha used, and Baha'u'llah also, to refer to the realm of manifestation. And this realm of, so it's just important for us to recognize it. And when we see, for example, where the Báb says, all things are created by his order, by God's order. This is speaking about Amr. It's talking about the kingdom of, or world of Amr, which is the first creation, which he also calls the primal will.
Yes, okay, because Amr is also mean the commandment.
Yes, of
in
course.
Arabic, the command of God.
It is the commandment of God, because as you know from the beginning of, from the book of Genesis, the book of Genesis says, and God said,
yeah.
and it was so. So this is the command of God.
Okay.
This is what happens when God makes a commandment, then things are. And this is why Baha'u'llah says that this is the appearance of him by whom the B and the E are joined together. And as you know, the original of that is the Kaf and the Nun.
Yes.
Yeah, which means kun, means
kun.
Create. Be.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So shall we move on to Vahid I? Sorry, I have unmuted myself. I want to again invite you, if there's anybody who has a question or a comment to at the beginning of this Vahid I, to go ahead before I will go through the points that I have identified as being salient in this particular Vahid, which is very short. Only 9 pages long, between pages 39 and 48. And as you know, if you've perused this, a lot of that material are notes that are written by the translator, by Nicolas, to try to explain the meaning of the terminology. So it's a very short part of the Persian Bayán. So again, if there's anybody who would like to ask a question or make a comment, please do so. I'm not seeing any hands. So I will jump in again. So the first theme is in the first Báb of Vahid I. And I'm going to go through them consecutively from 1 through 19. The first theme that he describes is that the essence of the Bayan, the essence of the Persian Bayán. And here he's probably referring to all of the writings, all of his writings, which he did very often. He would refer to them all as Bayan. The essence of the Bayan is to demonstrate the unity of God. For the Báb, everything derives from the unity of God. All truth derives from that unity. The second theme that he describes is that the Báb represents the primal will. And here he's speaking of the primal will at this moment of revelation of the Persian Bayán, because elsewhere, as we will see, the primal will is manifest in Jesus, and therefore in the Gospels. It is manifest in Muhammad, and therefore in the Qur'an. It is manifest in every manifestation and in every holy book. But he is very emphatic right here and now. That is, the primal will is being represented on planet Earth by me and in this book. Third theme, he speaks about there are two responses to the revelation. One kind of response is that of what he calls the Letters of Negation. These are the people who say, no, I will not follow this manifestation. And they may say this by their actions, by their words, or by both their actions and words. And then there are the people of affirmation. The people of affirmation are those who recognize and follow the manifestation when he declares himself. Then he has a beautiful reference to the letter of affirmation, where he equates it to be a leaf of the tree of affirmation. And as you'll see, one of the ways that he speaks of the manifestation is the tree of truth. The manifestation is, this is also an allusion to this tree mentioned in the Qur'an, beyond which there is no passing. So the believer in the manifestation is a leaf of this tree. This intimate connection is therefore established. The next theme is, he says that the unity of God is affirmed by the primal will, and it is manifest in him whom God shall make manifest. You're going to hear a lot about him whom God shall make manifest, because the principal theme, or the most repeated theme in the entire book, is him whom God shall make manifest. Then he goes on to explain what is the day of judgment. As you know, the day of judgment has been described in the Jewish scriptures and the Christian scriptures and in the Qur'an. And there are all sorts of beliefs about what that means. The Báb clearly explains what the day of judgment means in all scriptures. And I covered this in my analysis of the themes of the Persian Bayán. I mentioned this, and so you may have already read about it. Here in Vahid I, Báb 1, he speaks of the day of judgment, and he says, this is the day when the new manifestation of God appears. Then he, a connection to that theme is where he says that the only person who can be recognized as a true believer is the person who recognizes the manifestation when he comes, which is very interesting because we have very often a pluralistic idea of the recognition of manifestations, that sort of if you recognize one of them, then it's okay because, you know, they're all manifestations. But the Báb is very clear about that. He says, if you do not recognize the most recent one, then you are not a true believer. That the requirement in the religion of God is that you recognize its progressive nature, and that when the manifestation appears, you follow him, not the previous one or the previous to previous one, but the one who arrives at that time. And he's very adamant that not only is the Muslim who doesn't recognize him disobeying God, but that the Bábí who does not recognize him whom God shall make manifest is not a Bábí. By the way, if anybody wants to stop me and make a comment or ask a question, please do so. If you raise your hand, Jeremiah will or John will recognize you, and then I'll stop. Okay? But we have limited time, and so if I don't see a desire to speak, then I will keep moving. Another theme is, and this is going to be very interesting. He talks about the return. He says that with each coming of a manifestation, the holy ones of the past return. By the way, the metaphorical spiritual nature of this teaching is beautifully explained by Abdu'l-Baha in some answered questions. So I refer you to that explanation, because if you read it and then you go back and you read Persian Bayán, any sort of nutty ideas that might occur to you that we have reincarnation on our hands will disappear. And that's a good idea for them to disappear, because reincarnation is completely negated in the Bábí and Baha'i writings. So in the second Báb, you have the reference of the return of Muhammad and the return of his mirrors, which are the Imams. And then after that, about progressive revelation, that each successive manifestation is responding to the progressive needs of humanity and is divulging a further range of truth that that humanity is capable of understanding in this new period of time. Now what you're going to hear, very interesting in just a moment. First, he's going to talk about the first return, of course, of the return of Muhammad is what? It's the Báb. The return of his holy ones is what? It is the return of the Imams and of two other people who are described as the in the letters of the living, the Hurufi Hay, the 18 letters of the living. And now we're going to come to something really interesting. From the third Báb through the 19th Báb, every single one is saying that a particular holy person has returned in the revelation of the Bayan. He starts with Ali, first Imam. Then he goes to Fatima, who is Ali's wife and the daughter of Muhammad. By the way, if you're not aware of this, Ali was his cousin, but he was brought up by Muhammad virtually as a son during his early years because his father had died. Then after Fatima, it talks about Hassan, Hussein, Ali ibn Hussein, Muhammad ibn Ali, and so forth, all the way through the 12 imams. And then it doesn't stop with the 12 imams, because according to Imami Shi'i belief, that's the belief of the Muslims of Iran and a few other areas like part of Afghanistan, there were 4 intermediaries between the imam, the last imam, the 12th imam, and the Muslim community. And these were called the deputies, or in Arabic, abwáb. And interestingly enough, abwáb is the plural form for Báb. And so when you speak of each subdivision of a Vahid in the Persian Bayán or the Arabic Bayan, it's called Báb. And all of them together all called abwáb. The abwáb are the 4 intermediaries between the imams and the Muslims. There's an excellent discussion of this particular idea in a Wikipedia article about the 4 deputies. I recommend it to you. It's good. 4 deputies. Then there's also information, a good write-up about the concept of the 14 infallibles in this sect of Islam, this school of Islam, also in Wikipedia. It's simply called the 14 infallibles. You can also look up the imams if you wish. You will get a list of all of the imams, and there may be an article on each one of them. So in beginning with the first Vahid, if you know these things, if you know what he means by the abwáb, if you know what he means by the infallibles, it's very easy to comprehend what his point is here. His point is that every single holy soul in the time of Muhammad has its equivalent in the Bábí revelation. But we must also not think about this too dogmatically, because what he's doing is bridge building between, Muslims and his faith. His purpose is to attract their souls so that they will recognize the truth of his revelation by explaining that the very same holy souls that they already believe in Islam are to be found in the Bábí faith. He makes a very powerful argument for Muslims that they need not regard him as an outsider, as someone who's taking them away from their faith in God and their faith in the Qur'an.
Terry, we have a question from Kirk.
Yes, go ahead.
So in these, the first, second, third, fourth Báb of the Báb 16, 17, 18, 19 of Vahid I, the language is exactly the same in each one.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's the terminology, return to this world with whomever believed in him or in his truth, or in another than him.
Yes.
I'm a little perplexed by that last bit particularly, or in another than him.
Oh, yes, because he's speaking of, he's speaking of people who believe in that particular imam or deputy in the case of the abwáb, or another one. So, you know, the faith is the faith of an individual is not contingent simply on the belief, recognition, and following of one. It's conditional upon the awareness of all of them. And by the way, this is also a very powerful unifying statement of the Báb, because there were plenty of Muslims who broke off from the 12 Imam Shi'is, from the Ithna Ashari Shi'is, and said, no, this particular one, he's the last and the greatest of the Imams, and we don't recognize the other ones. There's a sect of Muslims to this day who are called the Ismailis. You may have heard about a fellow named the Aga Khan. He's a very famous man, enormously wealthy, who loves racehorses. The Aga Khan is the 49th Imam of the Ismailis. And the Ismailis are a group of Muslims who broke from the rest of the Shi'is, the rest of the followers of the 12 Imams, by saying, no, you know, we're not going to believe in the succession that you say. After so-and-so, it was his younger son who should have been the Imam. And so we're going to follow in that trajectory. And this happened, there are a few more interesting sort of permutations of that one. You've heard of the Druze. The Druze believe that Ali is the incarnation of God. So they actually believe that Ali is of a higher station than Muhammad. But you won't find the beliefs of the Druze written up much, because like many small sects of religions, they keep a low profile. And they've had good reason to do that, because throughout the history of Islam, those people who disagree with the majority are persecuted. And some of them are completely wiped out. And so the Ismailis had a vested interest in surviving. So did the Zaydis, so did some of the other groups. And by the way, this was, of course, one of the themes of the Imam, what are called the Imami Shi'is, which means those followers of the 12 Imams and the 4 deputies. As you have no doubt heard, they had a very strong belief in a doctrine which is not generally recognized as valid by Sunni Muslims. And that is the doctrine of Taqiyya. Taqiyya means I can lie to you about my true beliefs in order to enable me to survive so that I can continue to propagate them. And this was a standard part of Shia Islam for the purpose of survival. This was also one of the problems of some of the Sufis, was the Sufis didn't have a doctrine of Taqiyya for the most part, and they just went out and said things, and then the mainstream Sunni ulama, clergy, would say what you said is heretical, and so you must die. This is, of course, a very, this is a sidetracking theme, if I may say so. I don't want to go too far into this, but one of the powerful statements of both the Báb and Baha'u'llah is that the Quran never intended for those who had different views, understandings of the truth to be killed. And that this sort of treatment of people who have different ideas will not be continued by either Bábís or Baha'is. Yeah, as you must know, it is being continued by Orthodox Muslims, and particularly by Sunnis, but not just Sunnis. The reason why Baha'is are persecuted in Iran is not because they started a new religion. It's because they're regarded as heretics. They're regarded as gulat, which means you are unorthodox Muslims. You are leading Muslims astray with your false doctrines. So the penalty for that is death. Questions?
I had one more thing.
Yes.
There's floating around in my head the concept of the 12th Imam, the hidden Imam, as it's connected to the Bab, and this might be a good moment to straighten that out, because we're talking about 12 Imams here. So how does that all fit in with the concept of the Bab being somehow the hidden or 12th Imam?
Well, the Bab, there were stages in the Bab's revelation. It's important for everyone to understand that when he first spoke to his fellow Muslims about his station, he did not divulge the full extent of that station. It was possible for people to recognize, even in the very beginning, that he was a new manifestation of God. But it wasn't, it was possible yet to not recognize that, to see him as something else. And the purpose of that is the same purpose that you have Taqiyya in the Shi'i branch of Islam. It's called survival. There could be no point in the Bab only surviving for 1 year. He had more to say, a lot more to say, than he said in his first year. He revealed, for example, Qayyum al-Asma. The Qayyum al-Asma seems to recommend a few changes to Islamic law, including the change of the Bismillah. But it doesn't come right out and say, I'm the promised one, because you see, for Muslims of this particular group, this particular sect of Islam, there is no messenger of God after Muhammad. The Mahdi is not a messenger of God. The Mahdi, or he had many names, the Qaim, the Baqiyatullah, the Hujjatullah. This figure in Islam meant somebody who would revive Islam and bring it global, make it global, spread it all over the world. And so this is what he did initially, was he fulfilled the expectation of the Muslims to whom he had appeared, that he was the Mahdi that they were expecting. And then he went off on pilgrimage to Mecca. And when he came back, he starts gradually revealing to an ever-widening group of his followers his true station. And by the time you come to the Persian Bayán, which, by the way, is only a few years later, it's, you know, we're talking about, this is moving very fast, okay? 4 years later, 1848 is when the Persian Bayán was completed. This is 4 years after 1844. In the Persian Bayán, it's absolutely definite that he's a manifestation of God. So, but because, you know, in effect, what he explains in his later writings, and what is explained by Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha, is that this belief in a promised one of Islam was always interpreted in a minimalist way by Muslims, you see, and in a literal way. He was the one who was going to show up with the black flag and lead them to victory, conquering the world. You know, this idea is it's so remarkably similar to the ideas of the Messiah in not just in the Bible as interpreted by Jews, but the vast literature of Judaism. The expectation of Messiah is the same. He's a Jew, and he's going to convert the whole world to Judaism. And the expectation of every Christian is that when Jesus returns, he will spread the Christian faith to the entire planet. You see, ain't nothing changed. You know, this is the way people respond. We do not want to recognize the profundity of this concept. The fact that we're being challenged to meet the new representative from God, who at the same time is the old representative who has returned. For some reason, the Hindus have had a better time understanding that than the the people of the Middle East. So I won't digress on that point. So are there any questions about this first Vahid, or should we start in on the second Vahid?
Well, I do have one more, but John has one. I can see.
Okay.
Dawn didn't put up her physical, she put up her physical hand, not her electronic hand. So.
Yeah.
Was it Dawn or was it Lucinda?
No, it's Dawn. It's Dawn. The real Dawn. The real Dawn.
Okay.
Oh, and the
The
real
true dawn that has come upon us. The sun has arisen.
Okay. So I want to go back to the very beginning of the first Vahid, where there seems to me like my wheels are spinning with this a lot about affirmation and negation, and it seems to go down various rivers. Like one is about this statement that is from Islam that is mainly a statement of negation. There is no God but God. and he continues, I'm sorry, my voice is scratchy right now, talking about looking at that in different ways. But there's something I'm particularly interested in at the moment, because there's a lot going on here. And I will focus on, let's see, the bottom of page 39. There's this, he who, on the contrary, does not give his faith to these things is counted among the letters of negation and returns to the fire. And what fire is more ardent than that of the one who has not given his faith? And I think was it Steve who was mentioning Dante last time? I was thinking about that too. And I was thinking about how Dante goes, is suggesting a kind of cyclic journey. Is this the arc of ascent and descent kind of thing, where like it's not like the traditional Christian idea that we just want to go up and up, but that in fact, hell is just plain bad and paradise is just plain wonderful, and we just want to head for paradise. But in fact, that's not the way it works. That there's this metaphor here of the rising and setting of the sun, it seems, that the Bob is bringing in, and he tells us to look at that and to there's so much going on here. I'm trying to keep it narrow, but I'm mainly interested in this difference, seemingly difference in concept, where affirmation and negation are not, they are in a way good and bad, but in a way not at all. They're both necessary parts of existence. And it's more like, this is what I'm hearing from the Bob. It's more like we, like it says, what is more ardent? What did I read? Anyway, something like, what is more, gosh, I don't know, I just read it, but like there's a special, when you fall into hell and you look up, there's a special ardent position you're in, like you really, like there's a great longing, there's so far a journey ahead, and yet there's even as you reach the lowest point, you begin affirmation, you begin, possibly, if you choose, you begin the journey of affirmation. And so I guess in the long, we are always moving like higher on that journey, like cyclical spiral kind of thing, but we continue circling through. We shouldn't ever think that we're not going to be one of those, negation people. That's not going to happen to us, because it will. It's, do you know what I'm getting at? Sorry, trying.
I love the fact that you're talking about it in this way, because you're bringing it down to earth and you're bringing it in within the sort of realm of human experience, which ultimately it is for all of us. That's how we deal with religious concepts. We're not manifestations, we're human beings. And one of the things I wanted to mention is, some of you know that when he was a young man living in Baghdad, where he was about for 10 years, Abdu'l-Baha he loved swimming, horseback riding, and reading the Persian Bayán. When I read these statements of the Báb, and then I go back and I read the addresses, the talks of Abdu'l-Baha, where he talks about the sun of reality, where he talks about the cyclical nature of religion, about how it has a springtime and it has a fall and it has a winter and it has, and it goes through these seasons, and how the appearance of the truth is something that keeps coming back. When I read those, when I read Baha'u'llah's references, I see that in a very real way, what Baha'u'llah was writing and what the master was giving us are commentaries on the Persian Bayán. The Persian Bayán is the first place that we have these concepts from a manifestation of God, describing what happens in every cycle, in every religious dispensation. And then you have these unravelings of the truths that are contained there. And it's very important. By the way, we're going to come back to this. It's very important that we see them as a whole, because otherwise there's always the tendency in human beings to look for a simple explanation that fits our logic. And usually it's wrong. Isn't this like the major theme of the Kitab-i-Iqan? Is that generations after generations, dispensation after dispensation, the trained theologians of religion have been wrong. They have misinterpreted their scriptures. They have led their followers not to recognize the manifestation. And then he says this extraordinary thing. He says, purity of heart and chastity of soul is what you need to understand the word of God, not human learning. Revolutionary. It's revolutionary, friends, that it overturns thousands of years of religious civilization, where we took our commands and our understandings of reality from people who had credentials. Those are the people who know what they're talking about. And so we'll just follow them And that way we'll come to understand how things really are. It's very radical to be saying this is not dependent on human learning. And then I remember Hooper Dunbar describing his first meetings with African believers. And he said, I never in my life met believers like these. They are completely illiterate. They walked 50 miles to come to a Baha'i meeting. They were singing songs about Baha'u'llah the whole way. And he says, they have no education, but they know the truth. And they know the truth so profoundly that it has actually changed their lives from the inside out. So to go back a bit, this is what he's really talking about. This process of affirmation is not an intellectual one. It's not a surface one. You know how some Christians talk about being born again? Yeah, this is being born again. This is like having your whole life changed. And if we look at the early Bábís, some of whom are described in the Kitab-i-Iqan, and many of whom are described in the Dawnbreakers, they were so transformed spiritually by their encounter with Báb that they lost everything with smiles on their faces. We think of their sufferings and how, oh, it's so bad that they were tortured and they were killed and they were maimed, but they had smiles on their faces because they were spiritually transformed by this message. This is a theme. Again, we're going to see this reference to the letters of negation, the letters of affirmation, sometimes using different language over and over and over. Because the Báb is calling people to a level of spiritual growth that is beyond the terminology that they understand. They are Muslims. They are understanding things in Muslims' terms. And he is gradually waking them up to the fact that, no, reality is not what you thought it was. And it's immeasurably greater. So to even talk about this whole question of paradise and hellfire, the concepts that we have of those things and what we think Christians or Muslims or Jews believed in the past, they are exploded in the Persian Bayán. And it's not simple. We can't just put it in simple human language to say, well, this is what he meant, because then you don't really get it. You have to get it from him. When you get it from him, when we encounter where he talks about what does hellfire mean? What does paradise mean? It's revolutionary because it's not what we thought at all. Is there somebody else, or shall we continue and explore part of Vahid II?
I just wanted to follow up with, I was captured by that line that Dawn was reading as well. And I just put in the chat the quote that just kept coming to my mind as I read it, which is from the Prayer of Detachment by Baha'u'llah. I know not, oh my God, what the fire is, which thou didst kindle in thy land. And I to be honest, I couldn't tell you why this seems so strong in connection in my heart and head, but it was there and remains there. And I see someone else has quoted one, which is, and what fire is more ardent than that of the one who has not given his faith, which is this line. And it almost feels to me like a spiritual physics.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is there's always going to be negation. It's not like it's an accident. It's not like it's a fault. It's going to happen.
Right.
It's part of this repetitive, cyclical, but progressive process. We're not going in circles, but we're cycling, and we're cycling, spiraling upward, I guess. But because of this fact of negation, there will always be this energy, this incredible, ardent fire that will feed the next cycle. And it's in Vahid II, it gets more into that, as you say, Peter, the whole explanation there. But it just really captured me, that phrase, as it did Dawn. So I thought I'd just share that.
Another thing that I want to point out is that when you study the writings of Baha'u'llah, and often the explanations of the concepts in them, is that Baha'u'llah flips the whole concept. You see, the Báb is talking about paradise, and he's talking about hellfire. And then Baha'u'llah will blow everybody's mind by talking about the fire of the love of God. It's just, just when you thought you understood how to put things in little packages, he shows you, you can't. You can't. You have to leave your spirit open to endless growth, because that is the passage. That is what we are doing as human beings. We have endless growth. There's a passage in the Seven Valleys where Baha'u'llah says, traverse all of these worlds in the spirit of search, rather than in imitation. We're not here to imitate others. We're here in this world to discover truth for ourselves, with the understanding that we'll only get a little bit, an inkling of reality here. And we have infinite worlds of God in which to discover that reality. So is there somebody else who wants to be unmuted, or shall we move on? I'm not hearing any word. It is now, let's see, it is now 8 o'clock, 8:15, is that right? Your time?
Yes, that's correct.
You're correct.
Okay. How long do you want to continue this session?
We normally have it slated for about an hour, so we've reached that time. But we were going to, if there's a few more questions, maybe this would be a good point to stop, and then we can pick it up. But I think in order to make it through the 12 or 13 weeks, we'll have to make it 2 hours. But that's, we can have that discussion later.
Okay. What I want to propose for today is that we just take a few more minutes in which I will talk about the first Báb of the second Vahid, because in that Báb are some brand new ideas, which will be seminal ideas for the rest of the book. So if you will all tolerate a little bit more, I will go through 9 points that I have identified in that first Báb of Vahid II. Number one theme, and this is, by the way, the principal, really the only theme of the 7 proofs of the Báb, the book of the 7 proofs of the Báb. This theme is that the manifestation of God is proven to be a manifestation of God by virtue of the verses that he reveals, the divine verses that are without parallel, that cannot be compared with other human beings, with any human being. It then goes on to say that there are infinite clarifications about the meanings found in philosophy and science found through the Báb, what he calls himself the point of the Bayán, the Nuqt Bayán. Nuqt means point, and you may have recall this passage from the Kitab-i Agon. It's also found elsewhere, I think in the Secret of Divine Civilization of Abdu'l-Baha, where there's a hadith that says, knowledge is one point which the ignorant have multiplied. And so it's very interesting that the Báb has taken this title of Nuqt Bayán, and he refers to Muhammad as the Nuqt Quran or the Nuqt Furqan, which is another name for the Quran. But he's saying here that the horizons of philosophy and science are expanded in the writings of in his revealed writings. Then he says that the actual revelation of the verses is a proof of the manifestation. And then he points out, you will recall that Muhammad revealed in the course of 24 years, 4,600 verses. The Báb in this first reference says that he has revealed 1,000 verses in 5 hours, okay, at age 24. Again, the Báb is over and over going to point out that progressive revelation is demonstrated in everything, including the actual revelation of verses. The next he says that the signs of God are more obvious than the sun at midday. We'll come back to that. Because the sun at midday is a term that's used also in the Quran for something that's glaringly obvious. So for all those people who would say, I don't see any evidence that so-and-so is a manifestation, here is his declaration that the signs of his, the truth of his claims and his station as a manifestation are more clear than the sun in midday. So obviously, the thinking of the negator of the letter of negation is one that needs to be challenged, let's say. Another thing that he says in this first Báb is that by this time, in 1848, he has already revealed 100,000 verses, not including his sermons, which are called khutbah, and not including his explanations of matters of science and philosophy. And in the same verse, he says that he can reveal 2,000 verses in 5 hours. Then the next theme he talks about, he responds to a criticism that he's going to receive in Tabriz, where he will be examined by learned Muslim theologians who will say, but your grammar is not accurate. You do not write grammatically correct Arabic. And the Báb says that the grammar of language, human language, is derived from the grammar of the revealed word of God, not the other way around. Then the next theme is he says that the knowledge of sciences, the knowledge of philosophy, the knowledge of anything is only of utility if it results in our recognition of the truth of the manifestation and his teachings. Later on, I'll point out where Abdu'l-Baha says the same thing. Then another very important thing, he says, and this is certainly meant to reassure those who read the Persian Bayán, that most people are not in the path of pleasing God. Most people are rejecting the teachings of God, and this should not be of concern. Those who recognize them should simply proceed. Next, finally, he says that God has created and manages all things. Interesting, because when you think of how many theological disputations have occurred in religions on this very question, did God just make everything and then abandon it, and everything has to sort of fend for itself? Or is he actually involved in managing and governing the world? The Báb comes out very clearly with an affirmation of the latter interpretation. So those are the major themes. Those are the 9 major themes that I see in the first Báb of Vahid II. And we will continue with the rest of Vahid II next Wednesday. Does anybody have any question or comment that they want to make before we close for this week?
Thank you, Peter. This was wonderful. This was just wonderful.
I have to tell you that it is enormously rewarding for me to have this opportunity to share this book with my fellow Baha'is. It's been profoundly moving to me, but being able to share it with all of you is just taking it to another dimension.
Peter, Kirk here. Are these 9 themes you outlined just now, are they in your analysis and summary? I can't find them in that, it's not like a list. Is it in your summary of Vahid, Báb 1 of Vahid 2?
No, they're fresh.
Oh,
They come
okay,
from
it's fresh.
fresh
That's
reading,
fine.
a
That's
fresh
fine.
reading of these. Fresh reading of these tracks prior to our session today. What I will do is I will write them up briefly and
I lost you.
send them to Jeremiah, and he can either put them on the website or he can send them to you all by email.
Okay, that's good. I had one other thing about the shadow, or the midday, the brightness at midday. That's something, of course, Abdu'l-Baha said was going to be true about understanding why there are men only on the house. But the thing is that when I reflect on the concept of the sun at midday, I realize there's no shadow. When it's truly midday, in an astronomical sense, not because of a time zone, there is no shadow. And yet here, not so much in this Báb or Vahid, but later in the second Vahid, there's a lot of talk about shadowing of religion. And I'm wondering if the clarity comes when the shadowing of the religion ends. The sense of the shadow of Islam hanging over, or the shadow of Christianity hanging over Islam, or what have you. That if once that shadowing disappears, that the clarity would then emerge like it would be at midday.
Well, you could certainly understand this in the cyclic form of the seasons of religion that Abdu'l-Baha speaks of. Another way to understand this would be that perceiving the signs of God as evident as the sun at midday, it's all in us. It's all in us. Because we have the potential, the capacity to see this, because this is the reality. But it doesn't, of course, that doesn't mean that we do see it. How often we find that we read the writings and the first few times or many times that we read them over the years, we simply don't understand them or we misunderstand them. We think that they're telling us one thing, and then, but then he is promising us that we as human beings, as limited as we are, can in fact perceive objective truth, metaphysical truth. We'll come back to this because it's a major theme of Abdu'l-Baha when he talks about the different ways of knowing. And it's found in one of his tablets, which is called the Loy Fuad, because Fuad is a term found in the Quran, which is generally misunderstood. But Fuad, as explained in the Baha'i writings, is the innermost heart, which seems to correspond to the soul. It's the knowledge of the soul. And the knowledge of the soul is of reality, not of figments of our imagination. It's not our imagination. It's not our rationalization. It's not our rationalization. It's not our physical perception of the world. It's an inner knowledge. And this kind of inner knowledge is the same as what Baha'u'llah also calls the eye of certainty. Because through this kind of knowledge, we come to know with absolute certitude that something is true. And you know how often you see in the prayers especially, where Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Baha say, relieve us of the doubts. This is our human nature, we doubt everything. But asking God, relieve me of these doubts. Why? So that I can know with certitude, with complete conviction, because the soul who has complete conviction is invincible. How often Abdu'l-Baha talks about changing a gnat into an eagle. This is the same thing. How often he talks about one person can be responsible for the faith becoming manifest in an entire nation. And this again is about the tremendous power of faith, of that certitude that's unshakable.
Peter, if you don't, yeah, no. I just wanted to stop you there so that we can get ready to close this session. But before I do, I want to just ask that everyone please check your email. And there is going to be an email that goes out tonight at 10 p.m. You should receive it. And so if you want, you can go into your email program and type in admin@clearwaterbahais.org. And it should pull up even if it's in your trash or your spam. And then make sure to move that to your inbox so that you can see these, because I'm seeing that most of you are actually registered and you're receiving them, but quite a few of you do not actually open it. So it leads me to believe that it's just going to your spam box, possibly. Now, one last thing is there's a question from Lena, and it's in regards to reading the thematic analysis. How in those pages, how do we correlate those with the actual Bayan text? Are there page identifying marks, or how is it broken down, Peter?
No.
If I may clarify my question.
Yes,
please.
Okay. Now, I have the thematic analysis and I have been reading and studying that one and making points. But the pages referred, the reading, do they refer to the 622 pages of the Bayan translation? Is that where we're supposed to download 622 pages? I'm confused as to what page 39 refers to or page 63 refers to.
No, okay. I'm going to have to admit to you that I'm not sure, because this was my thematic analysis and summary was initially written in 1977, and then it was revised and updated in 2015. And it has not been revised and updated since. And the translation that we are reading is not by me.
Now, you mean the translation of the Bayan or the translation of the thematic analysis?
No, the translation of the Persian Bayán. If it refers, like if there's a reference to the Persian Bayán, a page in the Persian Bayán, in the thematic analysis.
Yeah.
You're not going to find that. That's not going to be any correspondence between that page and a page in the translation of the entire Persian Bayán. No.
Okay, I'm sorry. I have this in front of me that I downloaded from Jeremiah, and it says week 3, Vahid, pages 39 to 48, 9 pages, pages 49 to 132. What do these pages refer to? Which document?
Oh, those refer to the translation of the Persian Bayán that's at Baha'i Library.
Thank you.
Yeah. Because that's the document that we're reading. In order to access the text, this is the document that we're all reading. And what those pages do is they leave out any extra pages of commentary, introductions, and so forth that were written by Nicolas.
Okay, thank you.
If you want to read those, fine, but we really want to look at the text of the Bayan itself.
That helps a lot. Thank you.
All right. Well, I think that's it for the evening. I appreciate everything your time, Peter. Thank you so much. And I thank everyone else who joined us. And I hope to see you all next week.
Wonderful.